Hello, everybody. Welcome to Insights Fusion. Today we have Kevin Palmieri. He is a founder, host, and CSO of Next Level University, a global top 100 self improvement podcast with over 2,700 ish episodes, reaching millions of listeners in over 175 countries. But before all that, he was just another high achiever who seemingly had it all: money, success, and dream life, yet found himself on the edge of losing it all. So, today we're gonna cover profitable business and the passion related to it, biggest lessons, and interviewing some of the world's most successful people, the hard truths about entrepreneurship that nobody likes to talk about, and why self improvement is important. So, welcome, Kevin. What is it you do?
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I always say that I'm a podcaster. That is really what I am through and through. I podcast every single day. We do 8 episodes a week. So the majority of the time, you will find me sitting here in front of this microphone trying to formulate sentences that add value to people's lives. That's really what I identify as. And from that, we've been able to build a business where we do coaching and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I'm a podcaster.
Interesting. So you mentioned rock bottom on your description. Also mentioned that rock bottom has also a basement. So how that all experience correlates into who you are now and where you are?
Yeah, I think the reason I got to rock bottom in the first place was because I fell into the trap that I think a lot of people fall into of assuming that if I just go achieve external success, it'll fix all the stuff inside of me that I don't really like about me. And if you make a good amount of money and that doesn't fix the problem, maybe you need to make more money. And if you have an attractive partner in a good relationship and that doesn't fix the problem, you need a more attractive partner and a better relationship. Maybe the car is not fast enough, all of those things. That was really the problem that I found myself living with. I was somebody who didn't go to college, ended up somehow getting a really good job. I was making good money. My girlfriend was a model. I had a sports car. I was getting ready to compete in a bodybuilding show, so I was in the best shape I'll ever be in. Why wouldn't you be happy? That all sounds wonderful.
Why wouldn't you?
Right?
That's
why
a
why
good
wouldn't
question.
you? So all of this really came from a place of understanding that, for me at least, my opinion is the only way I'm ever really going to be fulfilled and sustainably fulfilled is if I find a way to grow my relationships, if I find a way to grow my bank account, if I find a way to evolve physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That became the through line of everything we do, based on the fact that most of my deepest pain came from my experience with not doing any of that. So that's really the inspiration and the motivation is I don't want to feel like that again. I think I have a good idea of why I felt that way. Let me try to do the opposite and see what happens. So far, it's worked pretty well. Knock on wood.
Definitely, I will also knock on wood. So, is it correct to think that potentially getting a high salary means a lot of work, long working hours, so you cannot really do all those fulfilling things? Because, why wouldn't you be able otherwise?
I think it depends. I think it depends on a lot of things. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on what business you're starting. It depends on what business you're running. It depends on a lot of different things. And I think it depends on circumstances. So I'm married. I don't have any children. I work from home. This is my office. I work from here for 12 hours a day, pretty much every day. The gym I go to is 6 minutes down the road. Everything is kind of optimized so I can exercise every day. My gym's open 24 hours. I can't use the excuse of, well, it's closed on Sunday. It's not. It's never closed. It's always open. So I think circumstantially, maybe we could align things better. Yeah, I know people that work 70, 80 hours a week and still are able to get some level of exercise in. They're still able to maybe do one date night a week with their partner. They're able to spend time with their families. So I think it's a conversation of circumstances. And I also think it's a conversation of core values and core beliefs. I'm somebody who didn't really want to have a big family. I didn't really want to have children. So this works really nicely for me. I'm a very simple man. I require very little difference in my life. I don't need a lot of fun, unique experiences. I'm good with sitting in here pretty much all day. So I think it's a layer, right? There's a layer below that of maybe you still can do the other stuff. It just has to be more of a discipline. Maybe you have to design your life a little bit better. I think it depends on a lot of different things, because if we think about it, if you have a high salary, that means you have resources that maybe other people don't. So maybe you work at a place that has a gym within the building. Awesome. Maybe you have access to massage therapists that cost $150 an hour that will come to your house on a Sunday. Awesome. I think it's a conversation of core values, priorities, and discipline as much as anything.
True. Like I relate to this. So you in your office, I'm also in my remote office where I spend the whole time. It's a nice wall here, on computers on the other side.
I feel you, friend. I feel you.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit funny. All right, so now you are entrepreneur, like a business person, right? What are the misconceptions that other people might have? What do you think, about the entrepreneurship, and that, and what debunks other thousands, people?
Yeah. The number one thing, and we hear it all the time, is I started a business so I could work less. Maybe that will happen eventually, but I think that is just an expectation that I think is dangerous to start with. I say this to podcasters all the time. If you think starting a podcast is going to be the reason you're successful, you're missing the point. Same with business. If you think like, you know what, I just haven't started the right business yet. Maybe you have that 1 in a million idea, but it's most likely going to take way more work than you think. You're probably not going to make money for a long period of time. And it's probably going to affect your self-worth more than you think, because in the beginning, you have to do things to get people through the door. There can't be any entitlement. There can't be any entitlement when it comes to this, because entitlement, people run the other way and you lose opportunities. So I think that's all really important to talk about. And I would say the other thing is the barrier to entry for starting a business has gone down a lot. So you really have to check in with like, why are we doing this? Are we just doing this because being an entrepreneur sounds fun and sexy? Okay, let's talk about that. But now there isn't as much commitment required. You pay your state or wherever you live, you pay $500, you get your LLC, and now you're a business owner. And that doesn't necessarily suggest you're going to be successful. Just like you can go to the gym and you can pay $9.99, but if you don't go in there every day and really use it, you're not gonna get results. And you can't blame the gym. It's not the gym's fault. So I think those are the biggest ones. And I think social media has made being an entrepreneur look really sexy and really easy.
Definitely.
Right? It's like, well, start a business and do some drop shipping and do this and do this. It's like, if it was that easy, everybody would do it. It's not. So yeah, I think those are probably the top ones I think about the most.
Yeah, it's quite easy to do it, but it doesn't mean you will get paid for it.
Right.
I think like a lot of people dream to be a CEO or president of a company, but it's a really long way, and it's a huge difference being like a CEO, like as an entrepreneur, even if it's a successful company, and like being seasoned professional CEO of 10,000 people company. Way different things, and both are really hard and has a really long way that you need to go through. And creating LLC or C corp, and and here you are, CEO. Mister, you can put on your suit. It's like check.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is it's like, just because you start the company doesn't mean you should be the CEO. I shouldn't be the CEO. You interviewed my business partner. He should be the CEO. He is way smarter than me. He went to one of the best technical schools in the world, and when he was there, started companies that he was the CEO of. I didn't even know what CEO meant when I started this business. I should not be the CEO. So I think that's the other thing that's pretty interesting to talk about is you might not be the number one in the business, and that's totally fine. I would much rather be a really good number two than a really bad number one. And that's why there's really no place for ego. It's not about whose name is on the door. It's not about whose name is on the plaque. I want to have a really impactful, successful business. And me understanding that I'm not the puzzle piece that fits into that slot is very important for me to understand.
Yes, probably no. If you concentrate on the title, it's more about ego. Uh, if you're a founder, you already are a shareholder, you are already a board member,
Mhm.
board hire CEO. So there's nothing to be really jealous about. You will still have it.
Well, you said it. It's ego. I just think it's ego. There was somebody I know who started a business and he started with somebody else and they're like, yeah, we're going to be co-CEOs. It's like, where did that come? Is that just an ego thing? Do you just both want your name? Don't you think one of you would be better than the other? But again, I guess we'll see, right? We'll see what happens in 10 years. And if they're still around doing it, maybe there's some credence to it, but it wouldn't work with us. I'll tell you that. I shouldn't be the CEO. That's not where my strengths lie.
Yeah, well, everybody has their own strengths, so it's just a smart thing to realize and acknowledge, and
Yeah.
there's no shame in it. It's like it's actually really really good thing to be able
Yeah.
to do it. Not everybody is able to do that.
Well, I understand. I think it takes a lot of humility and it takes a lot of, I don't know. I think it takes a lot of courage to say, "Hey, look, I think you're better at this than I am. I think the business would be more successful if you were in this position, not me. Maybe you're afraid you're going to get left behind. Maybe you're afraid you're going to get kicked out. Whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot going on there.
But it's internal. It's not like somebody else from outside, like other people will think, it's like kind of lame. I think they might be even jealous that you're able to acknowledge that, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, it's
everybody
possible.
is like afraid of that.
It's possible.
This
Yeah.
thing. Right. So you mentioned that a lot of people miss the point of podcasts and that you teach them, that's not the point. I just got curious. So, what is the point?
I believe the point of a podcast is to solve a unique problem for a unique person in a unique way and just add value. I think that's the ultimate thought. If I think business is a little bit different because most people do start businesses to make money. I mean, you kind of have to make money for it to work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the first reason. I think if you start a business because you want to solve a unique problem for a unique person in a unique way, your why power is stronger. You're going to kick it out longer. And if you don't make money for the first 4 years, you'll still be here in the fifth year. Casting is the same thing. There's a lot of people doing podcasts and there's a lot of people doing podcasts for the wrong reasons. And I wouldn't bet on them. We didn't start a podcast to get to 2,000 episodes. We started a podcast because we wanted to impact people and we wanted to build a really valuable self-improvement company. 2,000 episodes is just a byproduct of the goal. So I just have to keep going until we get there, which we'll never actually get there. It's a never-ending infinite goal.
Right.
So I think that this has always been my thought, and I'm curious to yours because you have way more experience in corporate settings than I do. If your entrance strategy comes with an exit strategy, I always feel like that's a potentially dangerous situation, especially maybe if it's your first business, your first podcast, whatever it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in general, so the question is if you have like an idea of your exit, basically have an exit plan when you just starting, right? So I think in general, when you plan your startup, I think it is healthy to think about the exit, and especially whether you are building it to be sold, like to other companies, so merger acquisition stuff, so you make the company big enough so it would bite painfully enough to some other giant, so they will just come and buy out, so you wouldn't be there and wouldn't annoy them anymore. That's a good strategy, like even in default, like C corp incorporation documents, if you do Y Combinator stuff, or incorporate through Stripe, it all has this exit like trigger that initiates like full vesting of the stocks. Right, so that's a good deal, good plan. Other one can be IPO, for example. So you build it big enough, you get investment. So basically, it's totally different path, because you, as a CEO, for example, you would probably spend the most time of yours fundraising and talking to investors, and talking how fancy your company is, like how you will make even more millions and potentially billions and unicorns and rainbows, all of that stuff. And so you need to fundraise to build the capital, so you would be able to IPO eventually, so somebody wouldn't buy out you that easily. Other option is, you might just make nice, decent salaries. It's not really like technically a startup, I guess. It's more like a business where you just grow your revenue and you pay yourself like a salary, 20K a month, something like that, maybe more. And that's also a good approach. It has dramatically less stress compared to those other two. It's like slower to start, more stressful at the beginning, but it's less stressful. So that's probably what you meant at the very beginning when you said maybe some other people start to work less. So in this scenario, you would eventually work less.
That's the goal.
But yeah, but you kind of need to think about it, and that would help you to plan and strategize about it. So
it makes sense. A lot of the people I've talked to, they don't have the understanding and or the strategy to have the exit at the beginning. They just think, they're like, yeah, well, one day I just won't have to work anymore. It's like, no, you're not reverse engineering this. You're just assuming one day something's going to happen. So 1,000%, especially with a startup, a lot of the people that I've worked with, this is like their first thing. It's their first business they're ever doing. And it's very much like, in the beginning, we're going to trade our time for money. And then eventually we'll scale that and we'll figure it out. Anytime somebody says like, yeah, I'm going to do it for 5 years, and then, I'll have my membership group that has 100,000 people. It's like, no. This is going to go wrong quickly. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Have you watched South Park?
Not in a long time.
So is the like character underpants gnomes, and they steal underpants.
Oh, I remember that.
And it's like, and they have a business strategy, like collect underpants plus question mark and then equals profit.
I remember that.
So we're super busy working really hard, and they had this business plan. It's like, do this and then question mark and profit.
We're just missing that one piece. We just got to figure out what's under the question mark, and we're going to be fine.
Yeah, but the other two parts are kind of clear.
Yeah, so makes sense.
You can start doing it. You have kind of half of it if you start working on it.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah.
I think it's super common mistake. I've done this like so many times myself. It took quite some years to actually realize and match to that meme. Interesting. So talking about those strange things that might not work always as you think they might. Do you had any failures that you learned from?
Oh yeah, so many. One of the reasons I'm trying to stay as humble as possible within business is because we had an opportunity. We had a mentor one time who, I don't know what his net worth was, probably $30 or $40 million, a very successful real estate person, very well connected. And he said, hey, I would like for you guys to produce my podcast. And I said, okay, what are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, cool. And I said, what you're looking for is $1,500 a month. He said, what if I pay you $3,000 up front for the first 3 months. I connect you with all the guests that I have on, and I allow you to sponsor the podcast. And I said, no, man, it's $1,500 a month or nothing. He chose nothing, and he never spoke to me again after that. That was a massive mistake. That was a massive, massive, massive mistake. It wasn't just about the money. There was a lot of connections. Who knows how many things would have rolled downhill from that podcast. So that was a massive mistake. That was one. Another thing that we did as a business is we did a lot of live events, way harder than I thought they were going to be. I thought it was like you see on TV, you just sell some tickets, people come in. It's like $10,000 to rent the venue and the food and the audio video. And it was just, so yeah, we lost a fair amount of money on live events. And I think we just fell into the trap of, well, next time it'll work. No, it didn't work next time. We beat our heads against the wall for long enough for that. And then we kind of decided to go virtual. So those are two very, very small ones in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, we have made so many hiring mistakes, firing mistakes, money mistakes, investing in the wrong things, playing too far out into the future where we are investing in an app that might make money in 10 years. And we're just investing thousands of dollars into it. So a lot of that was like the time perspective. Yeah, that was a big one. We made a lot of mistakes when it came to time perspective, for sure.
So, on the entrepreneur's journey, there obviously are a lot of failures, like ups and downs, more downs than ups probably. And that might induce some self-doubt, right? Because there are so many failures. And what's your approach on battling that? Do you had any imposter syndrome? I've read somewhere that it's not really a thing, but it's more like an idea or something. But let's say this is a feeling that we might have, and how you deal with all of that stuff.
Yes, I had imposter syndrome. Whether it's a real thing or not, I don't know. Before I joined this meeting, I was like, I don't know anything about AI. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. We're going to see what happens. So when it comes to failures and then getting back up, I think one of the best things you can do, and this is going to sound weird, is just control the level of failure that you're going to experience. So in theory, in the very beginning, you're not that high off the ground. So if you do fall, you're not going to get that badly hurt. That's when you start the compound effect of failure, because then eventually it doesn't bother you as much. So I would say try to focus on micro failures along the way for macro success. This is the example I always use. If you're somebody who wants to be a speaker, I don't want you to fail in 15 years when you get on a stage in front of 50,000 people. I want you to fail every time up until then a little bit, because that might break you and you might say, this is not for me. So micro failures for macro success. And then, go ahead.
No, please.
Just for imposter syndrome, what has worked really well for me, again, whether it's a thing or not, I don't know, but I try to focus on the most recent and relevant proof. So there was a podcast I went on at one point as a guest, and I was doing research. And this person was a doctor for NASA. So this person was a space doctor. And I remember thinking, I didn't even know that was a real thing. I mean, it makes sense, but I thought that was something you see on TV or in a movie. Like, this person must be extremely intelligent. How the heck did I get on this podcast? Like, there must be another Kevin Palmieri. But I had a very similar feeling a couple weeks earlier, and I just looked at the most recent and relevant proof that I had. This happened 2 weeks ago. I went on the podcast. It went really well. Let me talk myself down off of this fear cycle that I'm working through. I did it. It went really well. And now that's a new piece of recent and relevant proof. So I think even if we just said imposter syndrome is just specific limiting beliefs, if you run away from the limiting beliefs, they get worse. The only way to really work through them is to have some level of exposure therapy and just, again, I think starting small with everything is the best way to do it, especially if you're somebody who deals with limiting beliefs or low self-belief. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, right. So I know two opposite ideas. My grandmother always said the higher you rise, the lower you fall.
Interesting.
If you go let's say what you mentioned with public speaking, for example. So if you fail with a small audience, it's not really that terrible. If you go straight to 50,000 listeners, it might splash you to the ground.
Yes.
And you will never try it again,
Yes.
probably, ever.
Yes.
But the other thing is, you might have doubts, you might not believe in yourself that you can do, but you just need to throw that person into the river, and if they float, they float. If they drown, they drown. You have to float. There's no option.
You gotta float. You gotta float. But even to your point, let's throw them in a river that's only 1 foot deep. So if they do sink, they don't sink all the way to the bottom. They can just stand up and walk out and realize, you know what? Let me try again, or maybe this isn't for me. Live to fight another day.
But in that case, there might be too many days needed.
That is true. That is true. Well, and that's the hard part about all this is, I don't know, there really isn't a one size fits all answer. It all depends on who's getting, for your example, who's getting thrown into the river. It depends. It depends on their strengths, their weaknesses, how much belief they have, their past. There's so many things that go into it.
Well, I remember I was talking with one of potential investors. We discussed the startup idea and the group who might be leading it. And, so the question came up, so are they ready? And he's like, no, they're not. Nobody's ready. You have to throw them into the river and give the money, and make them CEO and so on, and they will either, drown or hopefully not.
It makes sense. You can't really be sure of anything, right? You can have an idea, but the idea is only an idea until you test it out.
Right. Yeah. I've been told that you scaled your podcast to 1 million in revenue, something like that.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you.
So what was the inflection point where it turned from, passion or hobby, something meaningful you wanted to do into serious business? 1 mil is really serious already, right?
I appreciate it. We were broke. That was the inflection point. Was I couldn't pay my bills. I was $30,000 in credit card debt, and I just didn't have any money. So we had to get creative with the whole process. That's the interesting thing is this, to your point, this started as a passion project. I started this because I loved podcasting. And I said, if I could find a way to do that for a living, I'd be the most fulfilled person ever. But we didn't really think about the living part fast enough. We waited 2 years to make any money. And at that point, I was just broke. So yeah, I had a conversation with my business partner. And I said, hey, man, I need to find a way to start making money, because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to continue this. And he said, well, what if we start coaching for free? And I said, I don't know if you missed what I said. I need to start making money. I need real money in the real world. And he said, well, Kev, you've never coached at this level before. I think you need to build belief in yourself that you can do it. And let's get some testimonials and see what happens. So I was talking to 5 people who I knew listened to our podcast. And I said, hey, I'm interested in doing some coaching. It's going to just be beta testing. I've never done it. I will coach you free every week for the next 8 weeks. No strings attached. I want to get experience. And at the end of those 8 weeks, everybody said yes. They said, I actually want to keep working with you. And I said, all right, what do you think of $50 per call? And everybody said yes. That was how we began the journey of taking this podcast and then eventually turning it and scaling it into kind of like a coaching company. But it started from massive pain and feeling like there was no way to get out of that pain, essentially.
Interesting. So the main revenue source is not like the podcast itself. Podcast is to build credibility, probably, and like coaching is like a consequence of that
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah.
That actually makes all that income.
Yeah. We've never made $1 from sponsorships, from ads, from affiliates. That's for us. It's all, if you listen to the podcast, my goal is to find a way to add value at a deeper level into your life, whether that's in a one to many, a one to few, a one to scale, one to one. That's the ultimate thing. Is the deeper you go into our business, the more valuable it gets. And that's always kind of been the thought. But that's the approach that I think a lot of people take, is they think, well, I'll start the show and then people will pay me money for sponsorships. You can do that, but it doesn't work like most people think.
I think you need to have very, very large volumes.
Massive. Man, we're talking
And
100,000 listens a month type D. I mean, when you get to that point, you can do sponsorships. But if that takes you 8 years to get to and you don't make any money in the meantime, you're going to die before you get there. So having alternative revenue ways and streams, I think is a super valuable way to go.
probably you can also split into two types. One is for smart people, which is not that many on this ball.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, so you do not really have that many views, and you need, but that consequence business is actually much more profitable. It's like it's expensive, right? It's not like, and the other part is more pop kind of thing, or like dancing silly things, like doing weird stuff that everybody loves, and you do not really need to be super smart,
Yeah,
to get
that's fair.
Which generates, so those people will not buy probably any mentorship which is expensive, right? So there's no way. But it kind of explains itself, like even now, like I'm talking, the more I'm talking, I'm getting it myself. Where's the angle here?
Well, I think there's just a creativity aspect in everything. And it depends on what I tell people that all the time. I feel like for a lot of people, the missing link is the creativity. Like, what's the outside the box idea that comes to you when you do something for long enough? I never planned on doing most of the stuff I'm doing today, but to your point, it was something that came after something else, right? It was just a byproduct of something else that created a new opportunity, but we never would have gotten those opportunities if we died in year 2. And none of this would be I think the consequence, labeling like that, like most of our success has been a consequence of the podcast success, but not in the way that a lot of people think. It's probably the best way to label it, for sure.
I would bet you tried all of those monetization things.
No. From the very beginning, it was, we're going to treat this like a homegrown thing. I don't want any investors. I don't want any outside money. I don't want anybody's hands in our cookie jar. So that never happened. And from the beginning, we said there will never be ads. There'll never be sponsors. We're going to try to figure it out our way. This is our problem to solve, right? Like, we started this. We should figure out how to do it.
Okay. So it was, I think, really serious decision at the beginning. Probably, I'm sure that it should be tempting to think about those outside sources,
It was definitely more tempting back then when nothing was working. Yeah. But it was, I don't know. I think that's why it goes back to why we started, right? When there's a purpose, when there is a through line, when there's something deeply meaningful about what you're doing, a lot of things just aren't options anymore. They just kind of slide off the table. It's just outside of alignment. And again, I know most businesses don't operate that way because they have different core values and different goals and all that. But yeah, it's worked really well for us in a way of we've had to get really good at everything. So quite the opposite of where we started. If anything, I work way more now than I ever have, even though we're 8 years in, and I don't see that shifting anytime soon. But that also wasn't the expectation. That's what I signed up for. So it works out nicely.
Okay. Okay. So it seems that when you mentioned at the beginning that the bar lowered to become an entrepreneur, enter the business. So that's true. So there wouldn't be that many entrepreneurs on LinkedIn, if it was not true. But I think that the threshold, the bar to be successful went up a lot also. So you have to be really resilient and keep going no matter what. Like, given that you do something smart and the right way, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But you have to push through it. And, there are not that many people who are able not to break along
Yeah.
the way.
I think that's why self-improvement is so valuable, because your business most likely will not grow and sustain at a higher level than you have become as a human. So that's always been our thing, is if I get really good at speaking and I get really good at all the things I do, and I'm super productive and I sleep 8 hours a night and I exercise every day and I take care of my mental health and I do all that stuff, I should really be able to be a pretty high performer for many, many, many years. And I'm less stressed out. I find that the external world affects me just a little bit less now, the more I work on myself as a vessel. There's something to be said about that. I mean, we have a pretty high output. I mean, we do an episode every day, and I have a bunch of clients, and my business partner has a bunch of clients, and there's meetings, and it's just wild. What I do today, I could never do 7 years ago. I remember in the beginning, I would have a coaching call and I would have to take a nap after, because I was like so stressed out. It was like, I get a coaching call, I got to cancel everything. Now I had one right before this, and it's, as you evolve as a human, your capabilities also evolve, and that crosses over into your relationships, that crosses over into your health, crosses over into your business, crosses over into your decision-making paradigms. So I think that's one of the unsung heroes in at least our success is I do not expect the business to grow any more than I do. And I definitely don't expect it to stay there. I don't expect that it'll sustain itself. I have to get better if I want this to grow.
Interesting. But how do you find time for all of those things? It's a lot.
It is. Well, we have a wonderful team, right? So while I'm here and I have the opportunity to talk with you, somebody is doing the thing that they're really good at behind the scenes. So that's one. The other thing is I'm very honest with myself about what I have to sacrifice. So I have very few friends that I spend time with. I don't really spend that much time with friends. I get to see my wife for 2 or 3 hours a night, right? If I work till 7, we go to bed by 9:30. So that's 2.5 hours. Sunday, I don't work. So Sunday is a day off. Again, the gym's right down the street. I go to sleep at the same time every day. I get up at the same time every day. So it's just, we're very regimented as a company. We all track habits. Every single person on the team tracks habits, and we have metrics and scores. The benefit of having a self-improvement company is I have to get better every day. And then everything else, to your point, is a consequence of that. Where I think with other people, it's like we have to focus on growing the business. Nothing else matters. That's how you end up divorced, out of shape, and having a heart attack at 40.
I've tried this approach. Well, it didn't went that bad, but
Good.
I could feel, where it's leading, so it's like anxiety is like rising. It's like, it seems like you feel stressed all the time, but then, walking, hiking, gym, those things really made a difference. I didn't believe that. Like, it's a time of waste. I thought, there's so many things to be done. I cannot just go to the gym and sit there, kind of. But,
it's understandable. I mean, it's understandable. I think one part of it is it's as much about the sprint as the longevity of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I believe if I do this for another 20 years and I have a really good routine and I take care of myself, that's the thing now that really it's become surprising to me that I used to be the guy who was like, I only really need 4 hours of sleep. 4 hours of sleep and I'm fine. Now I try to get a minimum of 7 every night. And I've noticed a drastic increase in my productivity, my mental capacity, my state, my mood. All of that stuff has gotten drastically better. I used to think, no, I'd rather work an extra 4 hours. I don't know. Not anymore. I think things have changed. Now, am I in a different season where I'm more privileged and I can sleep more? That's a conversation, right? So I'm not saying, hey, entrepreneur, go get 12 hours of sleep every night. I'm not saying that's the way necessarily, but that new season has definitely highlighted a lot of things that I used to think that I no longer.
Well, there's a lot of truth. There is statistics, like there was research done that office workers are productive about 3 hours per workday. So practically the rest is more or less, wasteful time. So coffee, chatting, procrastinating, dreaming, pretending that you're working, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, so if person sleeps for 4 hours, your work day expands, but your speed doesn't. So you just feel more tired. You kind of work more. Your solutions might not be the brightest to the problems, so it's slower, right? And if you recharge more and if you have good habits, like you go to the gym, you have some personal time, you still have that most productive time. And probably like in a percentage, from that workday, you just utilize the more percent
Yeah.
from that time.
You have to imagine. We started tracking our time like on a minute by minute basis. And again, I'm not spending 5 hours figuring out how much I did. It's kind of like a let's do it as we go. But by the end of today, if I actually do the math, it will probably be 7 hours of like full work. So this will count as however
Mm-hmm.
long you and I are together. I did a coaching call before, did some deep work this morning. I'm very curious to see what those numbers actually are because I get up at 6 a.m. and I leave the office at 6 p.m. Where is all that time going? Is all of it going
Mm-hmm.
to tasks? Definitely not. But let me see. Is it 60%? Is it so? I'm very, very curious. I'll report to you. I'll give you a report. That way you can add it when this episode comes out if you want.
Okay, we'll take note to follow up. So, okay, from all those habits, what would you, let's say, spotlight that changed, your effectiveness and
Mm.
how your personal and business growth? What's the one thing?
Probably the morning routine. It, I wake up, I do 20 minutes of mobility while I listen to a book, and then I go to the gym. That really grounds me. I mean, that's like super helpful for my mental health. That's something that I do like 6 times a week. I don't do it every day, but that's been very helpful for me because I have a habit, a bad habit of when things get really busy, I stop pouring into me. And then I'm not nearly as fulfilled. I don't want to work because I feel like crap about myself. That's that was the season of the better I feel about me, the better I operate. So there's something to be said about me pouring into my own self-improvement and personal development. That was supremely helpful. And then this was more of a tactic than a habit. My wife and I have separate beds. So we both have adjustable beds, but they're not connected. So if she tosses and turns, I don't feel it. If I toss and turn, she doesn't feel it. I sleep with earplugs, a nose strip, and a mask. So it's very dark. I can't hear anything. I can breathe through my nose, so I don't have to breathe through my mouth. That just really optimizing for quality sleep has been something I would have laughed at if you told me that in the beginning. Been like, Kev, come on, man. You need separate beds from your wife. It's been a game changer. It's been very, very, very beneficial for both of us.
Interesting. Last weekend we've been in a hotel, and there was like a new fancy bed, also separate sides. Also, it had this electronic like adaptation to your body. So you take remote, click the button, it weights you somehow and like
Interesting.
adapts to your forms.
Okay. How'd you sleep?
Pretty well.
Good.
It's kind of a bit weird, when you're not used to it. So you kind of used to turn on the side, turn on the other side, and when it's like formed already, it's like on your single shape. When you rotate, it's like doesn't really fit you, but it's an interesting idea. So, having some, protection from other people, like running in dreams, probably. All right. So let's talk about another thing. Your podcast mentions that you guys emphasize no BS approach. This is a no bullshit approach. If somebody doesn't know, and so what's the hard truth about success and that things people do not really like to hear?
So essentially the through line for us, the no BS is I care enough to tell you like the actual truth, even if you don't want to hear it. So most likely the upsides of what you're doing have been sold to you as better than they are, and the downsides most likely have been sold as far less than they actually are. So a really good example, and a lot of people are trying to convince themselves that the shortcut is the way, when in reality, for most of us, the shortcut is the way to just running in circles for the rest of our lives. So just as an example, we talked about the other day where I'm dieting right now. So I started at 190 pounds. I'm working my way down to 165 pounds. I believe an empowering belief that seems negative is I will most likely be hungry for the vast majority of this because that's what happens when you diet. A lot of other people are trying to solve and find the fix for here's how to lose weight and not be hungry. I don't know if it really ever is going to work that way without pills and stuff, because hunger is a physiological response to a caloric deficit. So if you're eating in a caloric deficit, your body's going to say, hey, I need more food to survive. And you're going to say, that's not what we're doing right now. So I just think that a lot of people only highlight the positives of growth and the positives of business and the positives of entrepreneurship and the positives of having a magnificent relationship. All of those have things under the iceberg that just kind of suck. And I don't want to be somebody who's negative. I just want to help somebody create accurate expectations. So when they start a business and they get punched in the face every day for the first 5 years, they don't think, oh, I'm doing something wrong. This isn't for me. No, that just might be par for the course for the journey that you've decided to embark upon. I just want to help people think more accurately. And sometimes that comes across as negative, and I don't want it to be. But I think for a while, we had like toxic grind your face off, don't see your family, sleep 4 hours a night. That's the only way to success. Then I think there was an overswing to only do it if it feels good. You should be able to make all the money you want and not work. If it's meant to be, it'll be. I think the truth lives somewhere in the middle, and I think we're trying to figure out what that accurate middle point is to help people build accurate expectations.
Right. Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
It's pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple, all things considered.
Right. Okay. So we almost at the time, I think. So one more question. So about AI, how do you see it? What opportunities and what threats can you see or feel? Maybe you notice already something. You work a lot and coach people. What's the impact? What are your thoughts about it?
I think it's really, really good to help you multiply a skill that you already have and save time doing it. And I think that it creates a short term win, but a potential long term loss from a skill development standpoint. So let's use this as an example. Let's say you put my profile into ChatGPT and said, hey, today I'm interviewing Kevin. Give me 25 powerful questions that I can ask him that will add value to my audience. This might be a great interview. But 100, 200, 3 episodes down the line, you're never going to be able to teach somebody about how to ask powerful, effective questions. What are you without ChatGPT? Like, what happens if ChatGPT goes down and you have an interview? You're going to have to cancel the interview. So I think in the short run, it makes life a lot easier for skills. But in the long run, if we're not developing the skills, it could put you into a place where you're very, very reliant upon something. So I think it's good to use it as a trampoline, not necessarily to use it as a crutch. Because when the crutch goes away, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
When the trampoline goes away, I mean, you can jump on the ground, you just don't jump as high as you did on the trampoline. So yeah, those are my current thoughts, just because I do work with a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'll just have ChatGPT make me a script. No, because if you want to be a speaker, you go on stage and there is no script. It's not the way it works. You're setting yourself up for pain, lots of pain later. So
It's terrible. I've tried. It's like so opposite how I would say it
yeah,
normally.
I think it's good. It's good if it's going to help you do stuff. But if you're reliant upon it, it's just, I think it's not like alcohol, but let's say you go to a networking event once a month and you have a little drink before you go because it helps you be more social. That's a good start if that's how you want to do it, but eventually you got to wean yourself off or you're never going to build the confidence to have conversations with strangers. I'm not telling you to get drunk before your networking events if you don't want to, but just as an example that maybe doesn't work. Yeah, that's my thought.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. I can imagine how it all puzzles together. All right. So, is there anything you would like to mention before we, wrap it up? Maybe people can find you and get some coaching. Uh, wh-
I
where can
would
they find you?
I appreciate that very much. I would start by saying that I think the through line to everything is improving yourself, because when you improve yourself, everything tends to improve. So that was kind of the through line of our conversation. And yeah, just shoot me an email. My email is kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. I'm happy to answer all the questions you have. If you have podcast questions, shoot them over. I will answer them all for free. I'm not going to make you pay to answer questions. Anything I can do to add value, that is the name of the game for us, is add as much value as humanly possible. So if I can be a resource to anybody, I am more than happy to do it. I very much appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin, very
Thank you,
much.
my
It
friend. I appreciate it.
was a really great conversation. I think it really will give value and food for thoughts for the audience, because we touched really serious topics that everybody should be thinking about, especially if somebody is really working on some idea and has this question mark in the middle and doesn't go to the gym. Now they will know where it might lead.
That's the goal. Well, I appreciate you having me on very much.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe and follow, and see you in the next episode. Take care.